Hi everyone, it's Kelly here. Welcome if this is your first time visiting my channel, and welcome back if you've been before. Lovely to have you either way. On this channel we talk books, and today I am giving you a wrap up of the best books I read in 2022. So these are 5 stars only, the books that I have loved, absolutely loved this year, and I'm very, very excited to share them with you. Please excuse the sound of scratching that's going on behind here as a cat is just slowly destroying my furniture. But we won't worry about that. That is what cats wish to do from time to time. All right, let's get straight into it. The first book, I'm going to give you these in the order in which I read them. So in January, I read 2 books that I ended up giving 5 stars to. The first is a non-fiction book called Mutton, The Surviving Culture of Aboriginal People and Abalone on the South Coast of New South Wales by Beryl, Cruse, Liddy, Stewart and Sue Norman. This is a book about exactly what it said there in the subtitle. So it's sort of a historic perspective of the ways in which the First Nations Aboriginal people on the south coast of New South Wales interacted with what we now call abalone. They called, actually I can't remember what they called it in their local languages, but was translated to mutton fish. And the sort of the ways in which that has sort of changed over time, not through any desire of Aboriginal people for it to change, but through changing value of abalone and changing bureaucracy and steps that people have to take in order to harvest the abalone. So it was so interesting. I learned so much from reading this book, and it was definitely a really fascinating insight into a specific food item and important, significant thing for Aboriginal people, and the ways in which the colonization kind of impacted their access and use of that food stuff. So super fascinating, and highly recommend, particularly if you are Australian, and particularly if you, as I do, like to holiday on the south coast. Such a really important local history that otherwise you might miss. So very recommended. The other book that I read and gave 5 stars to in January was a classic. This was not the edition I read, but I subsequently went out and bought this edition because I loved it so much. It is Persuasion by Jane Austen. I read this, I have a set of books, of Jane Austen books, and previously I had not read this book. So this is my new favourite Austen, replacing Pride and Prejudice. So Pride and Prejudice is now my number 2. Persuasion is now my favorite. So I was super stoked to find a book that of Jane Austen's that I loved even more than Pride and Prejudice, which I have a very long and strong history with. So yeah, very happy to have found this classic. Then no 5-star reads in February, but then in March I had 2 again. So the first one was Now That I See You by Emma Batchelor. So this is a book about a couple, and one of the people in that couple begins questioning their gender identity and gender presentation. And this is told from the perspective of the other partner. So it's the partner who is watching this kind of unfold and trying to be supportive while at the same time feeling the impacts of this very, seismic change, and navigating the very complex emotions that come up because of that change. So yeah, this was a stunning book, and I would highly recommend it to anybody. It was really beautifully written, and very heartfelt, very heartfelt. It was wonderful. So please get yourself a copy of this. It was brilliant. I mean, I would say that about all of the books that I'm recommending today. As I said, they're all 5-star reviews from me. Okay, the second 5-star review from the month of March was Creatures of Passage by Morowa Yejide. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing the name of the author of this book. This was unlike anything I've ever read before. And some of the things that sort of stick out in my memory of reading this book, because I'm recording this in December of 2022, is the cyclical nature of the way of the writing, sort of the ways in which, you know, the book kind of circles back and repeats phrases, and, you know, how the stories kind of weave together within this book to really create this atmosphere. So yeah, it was really unlike anything else I've ever read before. So it was a unique reading experience for me, and I absolutely loved it. So this is a book about, well, it's about a lot of things, but it centers around a woman who drives a cab of sorts, a taxi of sorts, a sort of magic taxi, and it's haunted, and there's a ghost living in the boot of the taxi, of the car. I can't explain to you what this book is about. You just have to read it. It's an experience. So very, very highly recommended. The next one that I read, so we're moving now into April, and the book I read in April that was a 5-star read for me was Any Ordinary Day by Leigh Sales. This book was gifted to me for Christmas, I think, and I really, really loved it. Again, this is non-fiction. Leigh Sales is an Australian journalist, and she wrote this book. So the subtitle for this book is Blindsides, Resilience, and What Happens After the Worst Day of Your Life. So in this book, she's talking about the some of the people that she's interviewed after huge, either kind of personal events that have happened to them, like, you know, the death of a loved one or something along those lines. But then also she's talking about natural disasters and, you know, terrorism situations, people she's interviewed in those circumstances, and how things, you know, you never expect the kind of things to happen to you. And she's kind of exploring that, and how these people kind of dealt with it, what happened for them that helped them to deal with what had occurred, or not. And it was a fascinating read, and very, very worthwhile. So please pick that one up if you can. Then we move into the month of May. I read one 5-star read in May, and it was a doozy, a poetry collection called Drop Bear by Evelyn Araluen. This was the winner of the Stella Prize here in Australia, and it was an absolutely worthy winner. I won't necessarily say that it's better than the other books that were nominated, because I haven't read those, but I have read this one and it was brilliant. So I really loved the way in which Evelyn Araluen weaved together these kind of disparate ideas to create atmosphere and to really hit home some of the points that she was making in her poetry. So Evelyn Araluen is an Aboriginal First Nations poet here in Australia, and a lot of the content of her poems is related to a First Nations experience of the world, the impact of colonization in Australia, and it was just, this is a stunning collection. And also, I think she really evokes a sense of place really, really well in this collection. So it's a highly recommended. Brilliant, brilliant. All brilliant, all of these books. Okay, moving into June. June was a tough reading month for me. I was stuck on a book that I wasn't enjoying. And so my husband suggested to me that I pick up a book I had already read and loved and reread it, which I did. And that book was The Tea Dragon Society. The first time I read this book, so this is a graphic novel by Kay O'Neill. The first time I read this, I gave it 5 stars. It retained its 5-star status when I reread it in the month of June. And the reason I picked this up is because I also had the second book in the series called The Tea Dragon Festival, and I also gave this 5 stars. So this series, highly recommend. There is a third. I do not have a copy of that as yet, but I will get one and I will read it, and I suspect that it will also be a 5-star, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, moving then into July. I read 3 books in July that I ended up giving 5 stars to. July was a very big reading month for me. I was on holidays on my own and I did a lot of reading. So the first is a memoir, and this is 10 Steps to Nanette by Hannah Gadsby. Hannah Gadsby is the Australian comedian who put out the groundbreaking show called Nanette that ended up being on Netflix and became, hugely popular worldwide. And this is the book about her journey to getting to the point of creating that show. So it's sort of about her early life and then moving into the sort of beginning of her career and how that sort of evolved to the place where she was ready to write that show. And this was a brilliant memoir. I listened to the audiobook of this memoir and it was read by Hannah Gadsby, and I certainly would recommend that experience. Then I read the brilliant winner of the Miles Franklin Award, Bodies of Light by Jennifer Down. This was stunning, absolutely stunning. So in this book, we learn piece by piece about the life of the main character. We find out quite early on that she was in the foster care system and that she had some really horrific things happen to her. And it's sort of about how her life kind of evolves from there. And we also know that she, at the beginning of the book, that she is now living with a different identity. So she's using a different name. She lives in a different country to where she grew up. So it's sort of about, we kind of find out piece by piece about her life, but it's just beautifully written. And the character, like you just warm so much to this character and feel so much for her as the hardness of her life kind of is revealed throughout the book. It's beautiful. Would be very triggering for some people, I imagine, because it does explore some quite, strong themes. I will link to my review of this book because, I discuss it more in detail there at a time when I have a lot more memory specifically about what went on. But yeah, definitely worth reading if it's something that you feel you can handle. Beautifully written. Then we move on to a book that I again listened to on audiobook. This one is The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw. This is a series of, I would say, like vignettes of women's lives. And it's sort of like behind the scenes, like the bit of a respectable woman that you don't get to see, and sort of these kind of very, sometimes jarring, sometimes just really surprising lives that they lead and the loves of their life and things that are going on for them. And it was absolutely brilliant. Then August, nothing. Moving into September, though, I had two. The first one is Luster by Raven Leilani. This is a book that I know has mixed reviews, and I guess I can see why some people might find it a difficult book to get to love, but I really, really loved it. And it's about a woman who is engages in a relationship with a married man. The married man's wife is aware of what's going on. It's not a secret. However, the evolution of that relationship, but then also the evolution of the relationship between the main character and the wife of her lover, is just fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And this was, edge of your seat kind of evolution of relationships, and I adored it. It was great. Then I read The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is not my copy. This is a copy I borrowed from my library and have covered up bits of, so I don't dox myself. But this is this was in the YA section at my library, or the library where I borrowed it from, and it is a book that is told in verse. Just to sort of show you what it looks like inside. So it's a verse novel. I historically have really enjoyed verse novels, but I don't think that necessarily it's because it's a verse novel that this was so appealing to me. I think it's actually just the storytelling that's in it. So we follow a teenage girl called Ziamara, and she is sort of finding herself. She ends up doing that through poetry, which is not something that she thinks her family will value, and she sort of is kind of dealing with complicated things like, her body changing and falling in love and all of those kind of things, and dealing with her family that are quite religious, and she's sort of got questions about that, and where she kind of sits with that. And so yeah, this was just a really great read, and I would highly recommend. Then turning my page in my notebook, we move into October. I have another, I don't know if you'd call this YA or middle grade, but I'd say it's kind of tending more towards YA, just in terms of some of the themes that are explored. This is called Catherine Called Birdie by Karen Cushman. This was, I guess I didn't really know what to expect. I didn't know that this book was not on my radar until I saw the ads for the show. Is it a movie or a show? I'm not sure. I actually haven't watched it yet, but I saw the ads for it and I was like, oh, that looks cool. And then I recalled seeing the book in my school library. I bought myself a copy because I loved it so much. This is about a girl. It's set in it begins on the 20th of March. No, sorry. When does it begin? Begins in September, and it's 1290. No, 1290. This follows a girl who is sort of, her father has land, but he's not rich. And so she's sort of like noble, I guess, sort of noble, but she's not kind of high-ranking noble. So this is basically about a very, very young teenage girl who her family are trying to marry her off, so that they can, you know, get income from that. And so, yeah, that's kind of like a very bare bones description of what happens in this book. It's much more complex than that, and her inner life is just beautifully conveyed in this book. She is a really feisty character, and she's sort of what you might describe as tomboyish, you know, in the sense that she's not interested in you know, typically feminine things of her time. She's much more keen to run around with her friend, who is a boy who is a goat herd, and, you know, just sort of muck about and have fun and get into mischief. That's the kind of kid she is. And it's sort of about her, I guess, being forced to become a woman. And this was, yeah, a really, really brilliant read. She's just such a likable scamp of a character. So yeah, very, very highly recommend it. And the last book that I have read, I will say so far, I'm recording this on the 21st of December, so there is still a chance that I may have more 5-star reads after this, but so far this is my last one of 2022. So I've spoken about this quite recently in my November wrap up, because it is Limberlost by Robbie Arnott. I read another Robbie Arnott book earlier this year that was a 4-star read for me. This one is superior, in my opinion. And in this book, we follow Ned, who is, again, a young teen at the beginning of the book. And we follow him as his 2 older brothers go away to war. His mother died not long after he was born, and so he has never had a mother figure, but his older sister is, I guess, sort of that for him. And he lives on a property called Limberlost with his father and sister. His 2 older brothers are away at war. And so we're in a time of where economically things are tight, and also their property, I believe it's an apple farm, if I'm not mistaken. And so they're trying to kind of manage without the 2 older brothers there to kind of help with the harvest and all of those kind of things. So it's sort of about, we follow things from Ned's perspective, but he doesn't always kind of get what's going on. He doesn't always get told things, and so he's making these decisions, and you know, his understanding is limited, and so we're sort of seeing things through his eyes, but just seeing him being confused and young and a little bit lost with things. So yeah, it's really, really well written. Robbie Arnott writes nature so beautifully, and also in this book, I think the inner life of the character has been beautifully portrayed. So it's a beautiful, beautiful book. So that is my 2022 so far. So you can see all the books. My 2022 stack of 5-star reads. I would recommend all of these. They were absolutely brilliant, and I'm so glad that I had a chance to read them this year. So please share with me if you have read any of these. Do you have different opinions to me? Maybe you didn't like some of these books as much as I did. Or tell me about your 5-star reads. What were the things that you read in 2022 that were your favorites? I'd love to hear all about it down in the comments. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope that your end to 2022 is smooth and happy, and I wish you all the best for 2023. Bye.